Hello, welcome to another video. I feel like I haven't done a wrap-up in ages, but it can only have been a month, because I definitely did a January one, but it feels like I haven't done one in a really long time. Anyway, today I'm bringing you my February wrap-up. I'm a little bit late with this. February kind of just vanished really quickly, and now we're like early March, but better late than never, right? So I recently worked out that I ended up reading a total of 9 works this month. I say 9 works, 8 books, 1 comic volume, which is really fantastic, especially for the shortest month of the year. I did not expect to complete 9 things at all, but I did, completely surprised myself, and here we are. And this month I've discovered a new favourite series of mine. Like, I seem to keep discovering new favourites. I need to, contain myself, but I've discovered another favourite. So, without any more rambling, let's just get into what I read in February. Now, the beginning of February, as you will know, I hosted my own readathon, which was the Polathon, which was from the 4th to the 10th of the month. It was only a week long, but it was polar fantasy based, so let's get into what I read for that first. I started that off with All the Wandering Light by Heather Fawcett. This is the sequel to Even the Darkest Stars, which was a book from a fairy loot ages ago that I absolutely loved. Took me completely by surprise. I wasn't expecting anything marvellous from it, and it just whacked me in the face and was like, love me! And I did. So this was one of my most anticipated reads for this year. I had been eagerly awaiting the release for this, and when I got it, I put it in my Polathon TBR. It was the first book that I tackled, and I read it in a day. Fabulous. If you've watched my vlog of that week, then you'll know everything I read that week, and you'll know my thoughts, because as I say, I read it in a day. I absolutely adored it, loved it. I don't have anything new to say about this one that I didn't say about the first one, because it's a direct continuation. It picks up exactly where the last one left off, and answers all of those unanswered questions. There is as much magic as there was in the first one, but in the first one it really takes you by surprise. So the first book, which is Even the Darkest Stars, follows a girl called Kamsin who wants to be a mountain explorer, and by some extraordinary means her dream becomes a reality, and she is set to accompany the Emperor's royal explorer to the top of the tallest mountain to retrieve some sort of treasure. And along the way, lots of stuff happens. It's way more fantastical than I expected it to be. I was expecting kind of just a wintry expedition, but there are dragons and witches and ghosts and stuff going on. So it completely took me by surprise, the first one, and I love the second one just as much. If you haven't read this duology, I'm pretty sure it's a duology, I really recommend it. It's really got those wintry vibes that I love, and with the adventure and the fantastical elements as well. I love it. I love all the characters and their relationships and everything as well. I really can't find much fault with these. They may be slightly tropey in areas and a bit predictable, but in the best possible way, a fun sort of way, if that makes any sense. I love this so much. I did give it a 4-star rating, not quite that 5, but only because I'm so picky with that 5-star-ness, and maybe if it wasn't as, not that the predictability was a bad thing because I loved it, but maybe for something to be a 5-star, it has to blow my mind and shock me. And it didn't have that sort of factor, but thoroughly enjoyable, very high 4-star rating. I think it was one of those that I kind of sat on the fence for a little while about 4, 5, 4, 5, but because I'm trying to be as picky as possible with my 5 stars, it landed in the 4 section, but I did thoroughly love it. The next book that I read for the Polathon, again I read in a single day because I was on it, was Girls Made of Snow and Glass by Melissa Bashardoust. This is a Snow White retelling with a sort of feminist twist about Lynette, who is Snow White, and Mina, who is the stepmother slash queen, and it's kind of flits between Lynette's and Mina's perspective, both when they were aged 16-ish, so present day Lynette at 16, and then it'll flip to Mina's perspective from when she was 16 and what she was doing at that age, and kind of it leads up to how they came to be in the situation that they are in now, or at the point of the book. I found this pretty slow to get into. I found it very easy to put down, especially with the flitting perspectives and time periods. I just find that stories that do that tend to lose me a little bit, because as soon as I get into one, it stops and then takes me back to the other one that I've kind of forgotten about in the time I've been leading up to it. So with the back and forth, I found it very easy to put down and quite slow going, but I did dedicate myself to it to finish it in the one day. The plot concept was very intriguing. I found the magic to be quite original, but I don't want to say what that is because spoilers, and I don't want to spoil it for you. Although it's on the back, but I would still say that's kind of a spoiler. So yeah, no. But yeah, the magic is very unique. I enjoyed the relationship that Lynette and Mina had and how that was constructed, and like you could see the conflicts there. I just felt it was quite a powerful feminist story. However, as a Snow White retelling from an entertainment point of view, just didn't grip me. I feel like the premise of this was really strong, but it just could have been better so that I was more engaged in it, perhaps. I gave it 3 stars, so it wasn't bad by any means. I did enjoy it. I just felt very disconnected to it, and it was very slow and put downable. But the plot was interesting. The magic was unique. My third read for the month and my third read for Polathon was The Snow Spider by Jenny Nimmo. This is the bind-up of the trilogy, but I only read the first one. This was a recommendation from my local Waterstones. They know that I'm into polar fantasy, and the woman said that this was a polar fantasy that she thought I might enjoy. So I picked it up and I gave it a go in the Polathon, and it was alright. Again, I gave this one 3 stars. It didn't blow me away. I felt quite disconnected to it, and it read very much like a classic children's tale, not so much the sort of middle grade that I'm familiar with reading today. It felt very classic. This follows a young boy called Gwyn, whose grandmother gives him some very bizarre gifts for his birthday and tells him he's a magician, or let's find out if you're a magician, etc. And he has to kind of work out what to do with these items to become a magician. And it read very classically. I mean, it was interesting enough. I read it in one sitting. It is only like under 200 pages, so easy enough to read in one sitting. But nothing astonishing, nothing that I would like shout about. Just, if you're into like classic children's stories, then this may be completely up your alley. But for me, it was just okay. My fourth and final read for the Polathon was Girl in the Tower by Catherine Arden, and this was incredible. I loved Bear and the Nightingale so much, so I really anticipated that I was going to love this. Bear and the Nightingale was my first 5-star read of last year, and I just was putting off reading this. And then the third and final instalment in the trilogy came out, and I thought, right, it's time to bite the bullet and read it. And oh boy, I love this so much. This was such a hard 5 stars, like no debate. If you've watched the vlog again, I was punching this book. I was getting like so emotionally invested in this. It was having like a physical reaction with me. I just felt so strongly about this. I've seen people say that they cried. I didn't cry, but I felt so much whilst reading this. I absolutely loved it. If you're not familiar with this is the Winter Night trilogy, Bear and the Nightingale, Girl in the Tower, and then the Winter of the Witch, which I haven't read yet, but I probably should. And they follow a young girl called Vasilisa, whose mother dies in childbirth, and whilst she's growing up, she can see these little sprite things from Slavic folklore, and no one else around her can see them because this is set in a time where religion is shifting and they're kind of forgetting the old gods and shifting into newer religions. So they're not appreciating the old gods, but Vasa can still see them. I don't know how to say what happens in this book without spoiling the first one, but essentially Vasa is a wild heart that cannot be tamed, and what is set out for her in medieval Russia is not what she wants. And she has such a spirit about her, and she takes the world by its reins, I suppose, and stuff happens. But I really don't want to spoil anything from the first one if you haven't read it by talking about this one. so I won't too much, but I absolutely love it. I know people say that the pacing for this series is slow. It's definitely a denser read, but it's so worth it and honestly so engaging. I absolutely adored this book. 5 stars, hands down. Loved it. Yes. So that marked the end of the Polathon, which meant I was moving on to other things, and the first other thing that I read was Truth Witch by Susan Dennard. And this is the series that I have fallen in love with. So the first book follows Safi and Iseult, who are thread sisters. Safi is a truth witch, and her magic allows her to be able to tell when someone is telling the truth versus a lie, and she can kind of feel the vibes of true or false in the world. Her thread sister Iseult is a thread witch, so she can see the threads that bind the world and people's threads that connect them to other people, and the colours of the threads are their emotions, and Iseult can see all that. The continent that they're on is like on the brink of war. The 20-year truce that their kingdoms have had is coming to an end, and everyone is kind of anticipating the worst. Safi and Iseult want to get away, want to have their own life. Safi is, I suppose, close to royalty, and she kind of doesn't want that life, and she just wants to run away and be free. But because she's a truth witch, if anyone finds out about her magic, like, she could be captured because she's incredibly valuable, because it's a very valuable piece of magic to have, especially for an empire on the brink of war. So lots of politics going on with an incredible main character duo. And I loved all of the other characters that came into this. I gave this one 4 stars. It was a very high 4 stars. Again, not quite that 5. I didn't fall completely in love at this stage, but I liked it an awful lot. I found it very engaging. Unfortunately, I did start this and then have to put it down for one reason or another, but I started it again and loved it. But whilst we're on it, the next book that I read was Wind Witch, which is the sequel to Truth Witch, and I gave that one 5 stars. I fell even more in love with these characters, the relationships that were forming, what's happening in this empire. Again, I won't say anything because I don't want to spoil anything, but the way, like, the politics are unfolding and the things that are going on, and like, who do you believe, who do you not, whose side are you on, who's right, who's wrong, who's the real enemy here, like all of that going on, as well as having the relationships with the characters and how much I love the cast of characters. I just fell in love. Plus the magic system, which I think is incredible as well. It took a little while in Truth Witch to kind of get my head around the magic system and how that works, but once I'd done it, love it. Completely. Yes. Adored it. Then I read Sight Witch, also by Susan Dennard. This is 2.5. It's a novella that I wasn't going to read, and was then told that in order to read Blood Witch, which is book 3, I absolutely must read this novella, but I didn't own it, so I had to download it on ebook, and I read that as well. And I didn't love that one as much. I gave that one a 3-star rating. The storytelling totally shifts. It's a prequel, but you have to read it after the first 2, following one of the side characters and like her backstory. But the information that you gain in that novella is essential to then what happens later in the series. And I didn't think I wanted to read it. I was just like, nah, I'm gonna go straight into it. But so many people were like, no, you have to read it. And then Susan Dennard herself was like, you need to read Sight Witch before you read Blood Witch. So I was like, oh, fine. Now I totally understand why everyone said that, and if you, like me, don't want to read this novella, I implore you, do it. It's worth it because it does give you some valuable information that you will need. But it's told in a diary format. It has got pictures, which is pretty cool, but it's told in a diary format, which is why I didn't rate it as highly. I wasn't as into the characters here because I'm so invested in these ones, and the storytelling was a bit different. But I still read it. I still enjoyed the world and the magic, I just wasn't as into the format of that one. And I would love to actually own a physical copy of this, but I don't, so ebook for that. So yeah, long story short, I've fallen in love with the Witchlands and Susan Dennard's writing, and I'm just like all for it. When I finished it, I was like, I need to get Blood Witch, like, now. But my next read for February was not Blood Witch. It was an accidental read, I'm calling it, because I didn't mean to pick it up. I kind of just did and thought, oh, I wonder what this is like, and ended up getting 200 pages into it, and then a bit later thought, should probably finish that now I'm so far into it. And that is The Glass Spare by Lauren DeStefano. I rated this 3 stars. It was okay, but I didn't love it. Which would then lead you to ask the question, why did you just sit and read 200 pages of it for no reason? I don't know, your guess is as good as mine there, but I did. So yeah, accidentally read this. The characters I didn't feel were too engaging, I kind of didn't care. The magic was interesting enough, like I'm interested to see how that pans out because it's a big plot point. I didn't find the characters engaging enough at all, but the plot was alright. As you can tell from the fact that I kept reading. The romance was incredibly unnecessary. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say on my thoughts on it. It follows a princess called Will who turns everything she touches into glass or gemstones or something, and she doesn't know why or how or what, and mayhem ensues. Basically, she knows that like if her father finds out, she'll be turned into a weapon or something. Yeah, her father, who is obviously the king, is kind of like forcing his way into a war, so again it's an empire on the brink of war, but nowhere near as engaging, and I don't feel like you learn anywhere near as much about the politics in this as you do in, you know, some other more developed series. So yeah, I gave it 3 stars. I don't think I'll pick the sequel up for this, I'm not that interested, but it's one that I had on my shelf that I've now read. Also, fun fact, I've learnt that I hate reading physical books with deckled edges. It's really uncomfortable. And then the one graphic novel or comic that I read was Mara, who I have no idea who is by because I don't own this. I'll put the cover up here. I read this whilst I was at G's this month because I was at hers. I had access to her comics, so of course I read one, and this is the one that I read. I said in my vlog, if you've seen my vlog, that G said she had an unpopular opinion about this, but I don't know what's unpopular about that because I quite liked it as well. I gave it 4 stars. It follows a girl who is like a really famous volleyball player, and then something happens and the plot kind of does a bit of a 180 and just goes elsewhere, but I won't say too much about that because spoilers. But I enjoyed it. It was very fun to read. Art I really enjoyed, and it was a good time. So yeah, I gave that one 4 stars. It was pretty solid. So I'm pretty happy with how my February reading month turned out. I'm really pleased with the amount that I read, especially considering it's the shortest month of the year and I managed to read 9 things. I'm really chuffed with that. So yes. Plus on top of that, 2 of them were 5-star reads, and I tend to be real picky with my 5-star reads. And the fact that last year I only had 8 overall, and this year I've already had 4. It's shaping up to be a pretty good reading year for me, so fingers crossed that sort of quality reading can continue. Okay, that's that for today. I hope you have enjoyed. Sorry this wrap-up's been a little bit late, but better late than never, as I said. So yes, if you want to chat to me about any of these books down below, please do. If you've enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye!